They say home is where the heart is, but not every home has four walls and a roof. Some are made of memories, moments, and the weight of a name whispered at midnight. To live in a man's heart, truly live there, you don't have to share his bed or fold his laundry. You don't need to be near his toothbrush to be near his soul. You live in his heart by haunting his silence, by echoing in his laughter, by being the rhythm in his days and the stillness in his nights. You become the thought he tries not to think, the voice that lingers even after he presses play on 100 distractions. It's not about physical presence, it's about emotional permanence. Be the woman who knew him before he knew himself, the one who listened deeper than his words and saw more than his smiles. Be the one who never needed a key to unlock his world because he walked through when he didn't even know the door was open. And when you love, don't love for attention, love with intention. Leave your fingerprints on his soul, not his windows. Let your energy stretch across distance. Let your spirit leave a trail in his life. Be the one he measures others against, the one he scrolls through his phone trying not to call. That's how you live in a man's heart, without living in his house. It's not witchcraft, it's not manipulation, it's presence, truth, and unforgettable energy. A woman who doesn't force herself into a man's life, but still ends up being the part of it he can't replace. That's legacy. That's magic. That's the kind of love that don't pack boxes when it leaves because it never really left. The real way to stay in a man's heart is through emotional depth, not physical proximity. It's not about how often you're around him, how many nights you've stayed over, or how familiar you are with the layout of his apartment. That kind of closeness fades. It gets old. The toothbrush on the sink starts to feel like clutter, not comfort, when the emotional core isn't solid. What really stays, what lingers, is when a woman touches a part of a man that he didn't even know existed. When she asks questions no one's ever asked him and listens not just to respond but to understand. When she sees through his front, catches the sigh behind his smile, and tells him he doesn't always have to be strong. That's the kind of woman who becomes a memory with breath. Someone who haunts him, not in pain, but in a bittersweet way that warms and burns at the same time. It's about reaching into his soul with gentleness and fire, about knowing how to speak life into him when the world keeps draining him. You don't have to sit across his table every morning to do that. You don't need to be wrapped in his hoodie to be wrapped around his mind. When your words, your essence, your belief in him starts to fill the spaces, his own confidence slips through. That's where love lives. That's where your spirit settles, deep in his chest, tucked between his fears and his dreams. Emotional depth builds roots in a place no other woman can touch, no matter how many selfies she's got with him or how many weekends they spend together. Because physical closeness is easy, anyone can be near. But emotional closeness, that's rare, that's divine. That's what builds a home in his heart, even if your name's not on his list. You make a permanent mark by understanding him better than he understands himself. And that ain't about playing games or reading every page of some relationship advice book. It's about tuning into his frequency so well that you start catching things even he's too scared to face. You listen with your heart, not just your ears. You pay attention to the pauses between his words, the way his energy shifts when he talks about his past, the crack in his voice when he mentions his mom, or the way his eyes light up when he speaks about that one childhood dream he tucked away and forgot. You memorize those things, you treasure them, because when you understand someone that deeply, you speak to parts of them they thought were hidden. You give language to their silence. You don't just nod along when he's venting. You remember what he said months ago and bring it back when he needs it most. You remind him of who he is when he forgets, and you reflect the version of him that even he struggles to believe in. You see the storm and the calm, the fire and the fear, and you don't flinch. That kind of understanding, it's rare. It's soul to soul, not surface level. And he'll feel it. Even if he can't explain it, he'll feel it. That kind of presence wraps itself around his mind and stays no matter who else enters his life. Because most people only love the parts they can see and touch, but you loved the parts of him that were buried, broken, and beautiful in ways he didn't even realize. That's why your memory won't just pass through like a phase. It'll settle, it'll etch itself into his story like ink on a page, impossible to erase. Because the moment he realizes you understood him in a way no one else ever did, that's the moment he knows no one ever really could. Being unforgettable doesn't come from being around all the time, but from leaving an impact that time can't erase. You could sit beside him every single day, sleep in his arms every night, and still fade from his memory like background noise if you never touched him in the places that matter. But when you say the one thing he needed to hear at the exact moment he didn't know he needed it, when you show up with silence instead of small talk, when you offer peace instead of pressure, when you become the soft place he didn't even know he was aching for, that's what makes you unforgettable. It's not in the grand gestures or loud declarations, it's in the little things done with soul. The way you remembered his father's favorite song and sent it to him on a hard day. The way you noticed he gets quieter when he's overwhelmed and didn't push, just stayed, held space. The way you never tried to fix him but simply reminded him he wasn't broken. That kind of love, the subtle, sacred kind, it brands itself into memory like a tattoo on the soul. You don't need to flood his phone with messages to stay on his mind. You don't need to be the loudest voice to be the one he hears when everything else goes quiet. You need to be the woman who made him feel seen even when he was hiding, who made him feel safe even when he didn't ask for it. Because when a man starts associating your presence with peace, that's something he can't shake. And when you're gone, it won't be your perfume or your playlist he misses first. It'll be the way you made the world softer. The way your energy turned everything warm, even in the coldest parts of him. That's what sticks. That's what echoes. That's what turns a moment into a memory that doesn't fade even when seasons change and people move on. Don't chase closeness, build connection. There's a difference, and it's the kind of difference that separates a fleeting vibe from a lasting bond. Closeness can be bought with time, forced with presence, demanded with effort. You can call him every night, show up to all his events, laugh at all his jokes, and still not mean anything to his soul. Because closeness is about proximity. Connection, that's about resonance. Not when two hearts speak a language that doesn't need translation. When silence feels full instead of awkward. When one look says more than an entire conversation ever could. You don't get that by pushing your way into his world. You get it by being rooted in your own. You build connection by showing up as your whole self, not watered down, not molded into what you think he wants, but raw, honest, deeply you. Because when a man sees you standing in your truth, loving without needing, present without pressuring, that's when he starts to feel something real. That's when walls come down, not because you asked, but because he wants to let you in. Because your energy doesn't feel like intrusion, it feels like invitation. Connection is built in the small sacred moments that don't scream for attention. In the way you ask how he's really doing and wait for the honest answer. In the way you notice he's shutting down and gently pull him back into the light without making him feel like a project. In the way you challenge his thinking without attacking his heart. It's soul work, not surface effort. And once it's there, no distance can destroy it. No time can dilute it. Because true connection isn't about texting all day or being tagged in his photos. It's about being the person he wants to tell good news to first. The one who calms his chaos without even saying a word. The one whose presence he doesn't just enjoy, he needs. That's when you stop trying to be close because you're already a part of him, not on the outside, not in his bed, but in the fabric of his life. Your value isn't in access to his house, but in the influence you carry in his world. You could have a key to his front door, know what shelf he keeps his cereal on, have your shoes by his welcome mat, and still mean nothing if your presence doesn't shift his spirit. Real value isn't about being allowed into his space, it's about how your presence transforms it. It's about the way he feels after you've left. Does the air still hum with your energy? Do your words echo in his quiet moments? Does your absence make the room feel colder, not just emptier? Too many chase the symbol of being chosen. The drawer in the bathroom, the Sunday coffee runs, the title that says girlfriend, but none of that guarantees your place in his heart. Your value isn't proven by proximity or permission. It's proven by how he thinks of you when he's by himself. When he's making decisions, do your words ring in his head? When he's about to give up, do your belief in him pull him back? That's where your real worth lies, not in the fact that you exist in his life, but that your energy influences it. A woman of value doesn't beg to be kept. She doesn't audition for love or trade pieces of herself just to be accepted. She knows that her power isn't in being available, it's in being unforgettable. Her words challenge him. Her presence elevates him. Her soul speaks to parts of him that no one else has reached. And that kind of woman, she doesn't have to ask to be remembered. She is impossible to forget. You're not valuable because you're near. You're valuable because of what you bring when you are. Peace, wisdom, strength, comfort, fire when needed, softness when it matters. You shape the atmosphere of his world without even touching a thing. That's not something you can fake. That's not something you can teach. That's just who you are. And once he's felt that, once your spirit has danced through the halls of his life, it doesn't matter if you're sitting on his couch or cities away. You're in it. You've left your mark not in the dust on the shelves, but in the rhythm of how he breathes. Love in a way that leaves memories, not just moments. Anybody can create a moment, a cute date, a goodnight kiss, a birthday surprise. Those are sweet, but they fade like perfume in the wind. Memories? They're stitched into the soul. They come back years later when a song plays on the radio, when a scent hits just right, or when he's driving alone and the world suddenly goes quiet. A woman who knows how to love beyond the temporary doesn't just give affection, she gives experience. She turns ordinary days into unforgettable stories. She makes him feel in a way that time can't erase. You don't need fireworks to be remembered. Sometimes it's the way you looked at him when he was doubting himself, the way you gently reminded him who he is when the world made him feel small. It's how you prayed for him when he didn't know, how you stood beside him without needing the spotlight, how your love didn't always speak, but it showed up. That's the kind of love that doesn't expire. Because it wasn't about taking, it was about planting seeds in his life that keep blooming long after you're gone. Real love etches itself into the in-between moments. When you laughed about something dumb at 2 a.m., when you sat in silence that didn't need to be filled, when you caught him staring at you like he was trying to memorize the way you existed, that's the kind of love that doesn't just live in the highlight reel, it's embedded in the background music of his life. And the thing about those kinds of memories, they don't need reminders. They resurface on their own. Because when you love someone fully, without agenda, without pressure, with honesty and presence, you become more than just a person they knew. You become a chapter they reread in their mind even when the book has moved on. a whisper in their choices, a warmth that returns out of nowhere. You don't have to be there physically to be there emotionally. You don't have to be his now to be his always. You just have to love with a kind of depth that leaves footprints no one else can walk in. You live in his heart when your presence becomes a feeling he can't shake, not a body he can replace. And that right there is the line between love and attachment, between someone he dated and someone he remembers. See, bodies are everywhere. Beauty, charm, even chemistry, those things come and go like seasons. But the way someone feels when they're around you, that's not so easily duplicated. That's the part that creeps into his chest late at night when everything else goes still. That's the part he'll search for in others and never quite find. Your presence, not just your physical presence, but your energy, your essence, it's what sets you apart. The peace you carry, the way your voice calms his chaos, the way your laugh makes things feel lighter, even when life's heavy. That's not something he can replace with a pretty face or a warm body. It's spiritual, it's atmospheric, it's soul-level influence. And when a woman gives that to a man, she becomes more than just a memory. She becomes a stand. It's not about always being available, it's not about being perfect. It's about being real in a world full of performance. Being consistent in your love, steady in your truth, rooted in your femininity without losing your fire. When you move like that, with grace and power, with warmth and boundaries, you leave an imprint that lingers far beyond the moments you shared. Because when the body is gone, when the calls stop, when the routines fade, all that's left is how you made him feel. Did he feel seen? Did he feel safe? Did he feel like he was more himself with you than he ever was alone? That feeling becomes a part of him, stitched into his story. He might try to move on. He might even convince himself he has. But somewhere in the background of every new beginning, your name hums like a melody he can't unlearn. So let them say what they will, that you never lived in his house, never shared his mornings, never cooked in his kitchen, or folded your life into his drawers. Let them count what they can see. But you'll know the truth. You'll know you lived in a place deeper than walls could hold. You built something sacred in the quiet, in the spaces between your laughter and his stillness. You lived in his heart, and not everyone gets that honor. Because a house can be sold, a bed can be made with someone new, routines can be rewritten, but the heart, that's a different kind of space. That's where the real ones stay, that's where the unforgettable live. And if you ever lived there, really lived, then no matter what comes after, no matter how many doors he walks through, you'll always be the one that doesn't leave when you're gone.